Hello everyone, welcome back to another Bookmas video, and today is a little bit different because I am going to be talking about books that I love that are from genres that I don't love quite as much. Before I go over the list, please do let me know in the comments some books that are out of your comfort zone, some books that you have loved that are from genres that you're just not drawn to, but you loved the books. They really surprised you. I would love to know. I just want to say that the genres that I absolutely hate and want nothing, like I don't want to read anything from those genres. There are no books on this list, obviously, because if I read from those genres, I hated the books. I don't want anything more to do with those genres. But these are genres that I don't love. It's not that I hate them, they're not genres that call to me and that I gravitate towards, if that makes sense. So I don't love them, but they're not awful. So I guess they're kind of like books outside of my personal comfort zone, outside of the list of genres that I love with all of my heart. The biggest one for me is actually thriller, which is interesting because I love mysteries, but I always have such bad luck with thrillers. And I'm just not drawn to them. They usually disappoint me, but there are 4 books that I want to share that I really loved, and they are thrillers. One of them is kind of horror, and that's another genre that I stay away from. Me personally, I can't do horror, but there is a book that is kind of labeled as horror thriller, and it does have paranormal elements, but I think there's so much more to this book. I have talked about it before, and that is The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This book to me is more of a dual timeline, tragic, heartbreaking mystery with a paranormal twist to it. Yes, it is labeled as horror and thriller, but I loved this book. It is a 5-star read for me, and I need to reread it soon, but it's definitely not for everyone. I think there might have been some language I don't quite remember, but I loved this book so much. It had a huge impact on me, and it made me realize that even ghost stories can have beautiful morals to them, and love this book. Another thriller I overall really enjoyed is Miracle Creek, and this was actually a courtroom thriller, which I never thought I would enjoy, and I'm definitely interested in trying out some more. The only thing is it can't just be set in a courtroom. I would be bored to tears. But this book had more than just the courtroom drama. It had quite a bit more, and it had a lot of moments of me questioning what on earth is happening. And I think that's what I enjoyed so much. And then everything came together very nicely in the end. So I definitely think this is a great one. It has to do with a fire that was set, and it basically caused an explosion in this oxygen therapy treatment type of room. And it was a very experimental treatment, and some children died, some adults died, and it's just very tragic, but a very good thriller. This next one is quite controversial, and I completely understand there's some controversy with the author, but setting that aside, I really enjoyed The Woman in the Window. This is another book that I understand if people don't like it, and I get it, but for me, I just was constantly on the edge of my seat while reading it. It was the definition of a thriller for me. It was perfect. I loved it, and I don't recommend it for everyone, but I really enjoyed it. This one is about a woman who is in this apartment, and she is a very unreliable narrator, and I don't really want to say much else, but you just ask so many questions, like what on earth is going on? What's going on? I think that the ending I wasn't the biggest fan of, but overall I loved the reading experience with this book. And then the 4th thriller on this list, and the last one as well, is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I also loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. It's not perfect, and it's another reason why I don't gravitate to thrillers, is even the ones that I love, there are just aspects of it that I'm like, oh, I wish that wasn't, I wish it didn't happen that way or whatever. But I loved this book. It's kind of a haunted house thriller, but without anything paranormal, and it's just fun. It is pure fun. I had a great time with it, and I would recommend it. Just has some language, but I would definitely recommend this thriller. All right, so next is not really a genre. I would say it's more of a category, but that is YA, and YA fantasy to be exact. I'm just not really drawn to it, and I started reading it for the first time just a couple years ago, found some books that I loved, but then since then I've just not been drawn to it, and a lot of the books that I've tried I ended up DNFing, and I just wasn't enjoying them. A lot of it has to do with teen angst. I don't like teenage angst at all. It just detracts from my interest, makes it less bearable for me, and the romances are super cringy, and I can't handle that. So I've been staying away from a lot of YA fantasy, but some of the ones that I love, you could say there is teen angst, but the other elements of the stories just make all of that null for me. I don't care. I just love the books. I love the writing. I love the worlds. I love the character interactions, and they're just amazing to me. So the first one that I would say is Cinder. And by Cinder, I mean the entire Lunar Chronicles. This series is so good. It is so much fun, and I honestly have no complaints about any of the books. I think 2 of them were 4 stars and 2 of them were 5 stars, but they were just so fun. This is the kind of YA, I mean, this is sci-fi, but it's the kind of YA science fiction fantasy that I want more of. And there's just not a lot of it, and that really makes me sad. But I think the characters were amazing, and the dynamics were amazing, and the world building was very interesting. It's actually set on Earth, but it's futuristic. I would highly recommend the series to anyone. It is so, so good. We just need a moment to appreciate how beautiful the other books in this series are, but this one is Scarlet, and I love these editions. This is Cress, so beautiful. And then the last one is Winter, beautiful cover. And they're very floppy, which I love it so much. Okay, so next is another YA fantasy series that I'm in love with, and I just had such a great time with them. And I'm talking about the Caraval series. We have Caraval, Legendary, and Finale. And I just love these books. I love them so much. And honestly, it mainly has to do with the atmosphere and the fact that it has like very, very magical circus vibes. And oh, I just loved these books. I love Stephanie Garber's writing. And while there is a lot of angst, I can say that there's a lot of it. I do think that the sister relationship was incredible. And I really, really came to care for the characters, even the so-called villains. We have Julian, Dante, and Jax, and so good. But honestly, the world is fascinating, and the backstory of the fates and what this author did, I love it so much. And I would even say Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Ballad of Never After. Once Upon a Broken Heart is my least favorite out of all 5 books, but The Ballad of Never After is actually my favorite than the series. But oh my gosh, I love it so much. One of my favorite fairy tale retellings that is YA, I would say, is Hunted by Megan Spooner. Super underrated. I think more people need to read this book. It is so wintry, and I think this was Slavic inspired as well, so just perfect for this time of year. And then the first 2 books that I ever read by Juliette Marillier, we have Wildwood Dancing and Sibylle's Secret, and this is a duology, and they're basically based on sisters. The first one has to do with all 5 sisters, and this one has to do with just one of them in particular. And when I think about these books, it's like the cover on this one especially, this is kind of how it feels when you read it. Like I don't have words, I can't articulate how I felt reading this book, but it's just this magic and this otherworldly aura that you just feel around you when you read it. Juliette Marillier can write fantasy like no other. These books are so fun. And this one in particular, Sibylle's Secret, is super, super adventurous. This one is set in Anatolia, so now it's Turkey, but this one was just so fun. And they are medieval as well. So this one is set in medieval Romania and then medieval Turkey. Loved these books so much. Next up, we have a book that felt like a Disney movie. I loved it. Oh, I'm just so excited. 6 Crimson Cranes. This was a Disney movie in a book for me. Oh my goodness. I recommend this to anyone who loves Disney, anyone who loves fantasy that makes them feel cozy and comforted and just amazing. And it's inspired by, I think, Chinese mythology, and the 6 Crimson Cranes fairy tale. I forget what the actual fairy tale is called, but it is a fairy tale retelling. One of the best YA fantasies I've ever read. I would highly recommend. This next book is a YA Christian fantasy that I read because Oshina recommended it and I loved it. And that is Heart of Red, Blood of Blue. And this is actually a really, really special story. It features a main character with albinism, which I have never seen in a book before, ever. And I think more disability representation is needed, especially in fantasy. And like I said, albinism is just nothing that I've ever read in a book, and it was dealt with so well. This book was beautiful. It was a beautiful, kind of high stakes story, I would say. I would highly, highly recommend. It is YA fantasy, but I think it's great. All right, and then the last collection here are by, I think, my favorite YA fantasy author. I think it's safe to say she's my favorite. And it is these books by Rebecca Ross. And this is one of the first YA fantasy books I have ever read, The Queen's Rising. I just randomly picked this up at the bookstore, not knowing what it was about, and I was hooked. It is set in a world inspired by both France and Scotland, which I think is really cool. And the two countries that are inspired by France and Scotland are warring with each other, basically. And there's a lot of political intrigue and a really cool magic system that has to do with talents, which are called passions in this book. And then the second book in the duology is The Queen's Resistance. Not a lot of people like this one, and I think it has to do more with the romance than anything, but I think it's a very good conclusion to the duology. So love Rebecca Ross so much. And then I have one more book by her that I think is my favorite by her currently, and that is Dreams Lie Beneath. This one is so whimsical and atmospheric, and this is the kind of book that made me feel like I was in the midst of a foggy, misty forest full of pine trees, juniper trees, just with mountains everywhere. It was beautiful. I loved it so much, and it has an enemies to lovers trope, which is my favorite, and I just love this so much. All right, and then the last genre that I know the majority of you guys know that I'm not a fan of, but I'm not opposed to trying out more books in this genre, and I have been, and I'm talking about contemporary romance. It's just not my thing. It's really not my thing, and that's completely okay. I have friends who don't really like historical romance. They're just not drawn to historical fiction in general, but they've tried some and they loved what they've tried. So I think it's great to read outside of your comfort zone because there are definitely gems for everyone. And within this genre, I would say that my current favorites are Love and a Little White Lie and Love and the Silver Lining by Tammy L. Gray. Thank you to my booktube friends, Oshina, Bailey, Amanda, just all of you guys who have read these books and recommended them because they're amazing. I loved them so much. Perfect contemporary romance, so fun, and they are Christian as well, so great faith elements. And then this next one is one that I wouldn't say is for everyone. There are a couple elements to it that I wasn't the biggest fan of, but as a contemporary story, I thought it was great, and that is The Star-Crossed Sisters of Tuscany. And the reason that I love this book also has to do with the fact that it's set in Italy. There's travel, and it's just overflowing with references to Italian culture and food, and I loved that. This next one is actually a YA contemporary romance, but it also has to do with traveling to Italy, and that is Love and Gelato. This is another very fun one that I loved. So there's another YA and another romance that I enjoyed. And then there are two more for this entire list, and they are shipped, and I forget the author's name, but I'll insert a picture of it. This one, again, it has to do with travel, and I think that if a romance book has travel in it and a lot of culture and a lot of references to where the characters are traveling, I'm much more likely to enjoy it. So Shipped was a lot of fun. It's set in the Galapagos Islands, and it's just a very quick read. It was nothing special, but I really had a great time with it. And then I have one last contemporary romance that is one of my favorites, and that is The Masterpiece by Francine Rivers. This book is just amazing. It deals with some very difficult topics. It is not the kind of book that will sugarcoat anything. It will not shy away from the consequences of, the choices that we make. It's amazing. I loved this book so much. And it has to do with this artist. He's a very wealthy man. His name is Roman, and he is also a secret street graffiti artist kind of thing, and no one really knows the artist's identity. And this young woman comes to work for him. She has a baby, and she's just trying to survive. She's suffering financially. She comes to work for Roman, and things go from there. Very emotional read. A lot happens. Such a good book. Okay, everyone, so those are some books from genres that I don't love so much, but I really loved the books. I really enjoyed them. They're outside of my comfort zone, but they just work for me, and I'm really glad that I read each of the books on this list. Again, let me know in the comments if you have any books that you've read that were not really in your comfort zone, but you really loved the book. I would love to know. That's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next Bookmas video. Bye!